Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, for giving me the floor. Your Imperial Highness, Your Royal Highness, Mr. Prime Minister, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to address this high-level panel meeting in support of Secretary General's esteemed advisory board on water and sanitation. I take this opportunity to thank him for his leadership in galvanizing global action on water and disaster mitigation issues. I would also like to express my heartfelt appreciation to His Imperial Highness Crown Prince Naruhito, as well as to His Royal Highness William Alexander, Prince of Orange, for their steadfast dedication to advancing the mission of the board. Finally, allow me to acknowledge the unfaltering commitment of former Prime Minister of South Korea, Han Sang-soo, the founding chair of this high-level panel and one of my most notable predecessors as the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I hope that the results of today's discussions will help set the tone for upcoming water-related events, such as the high-level international conference on water cooperation to be held in Tajikistan in August, the Stockholm World Water Week a month later, and the Budapest Water Summit this October. I also expect the outcome of this meeting to be an important input to the General Assembly's high-level interactive dialogue that I have convened in the General Assembly on March 22nd of this year, World Water Day. Its main objective will be to identify water-related issues for which stronger international political commitment is required, as well as to highlight innovative practical solutions to overcoming the challenges they pose. Excellencies, an increasing number of water-related disasters are affecting member states in just about every corner of the planet. Just 4 months ago here in New York, the Hurricane Sandy swept across the coast, also across the Caribbean coast, claiming close to 200 lives and resulting in appalling destruction. Thousands of people, both in developed and developing world, are still recovering. Entire neighborhoods are being rebuilt, and work is ongoing to rejuvenate agriculture, energy, and transportation infrastructures in the hardest hit areas. The final cost is expected to run to tens of billions of US dollars. Almost 2 years ago, a tsunami ravaged northeast Japan, drowning over 16,000 people and rendering hundreds of thousands homeless. I personally will never forget this dreadful day because I was a foreign minister on a state visit to Japan, leaving Japan on that very day when it happened, and landed in Europe having learned about the devastation. In 2006, the river Danube flooded over its banks, severely impacting the economies of Southeast European states, including my home country of Serbia. In Southern Africa, the floods have been getting worse and worse, destroying crops and leaving people without livelihoods at higher rates than ever before. And in Southeast Asia, floods caused by cyclones regularly cause death and the one-time destruction of property valued in the millions of dollars each time. The problems we face are thus truly global in essence, although it is the poorest nations that inevitably bear the greatest burden. Low-income countries are generally less resilient to climatic shocks and are slower to recover from the resulting disasters. The least developed countries and the small island developing states are particularly vulnerable in this regard. Excellencies, the risks of extreme weather events are being multiplied by a range of factors, including climate change, increased population pressures, declining ecosystems, and unplanned urbanization. I'm afraid we can expect water-related disasters to increase in intensity unless we tackle these issues in a global coordinated effort. An alarming recent report by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has projected that the number of people living in seriously water-stressed river basins across the world will double until 2050 to 3.9 billion people. It is clear that we need to work much more closely together in order to properly address this grave threat. As President of the General Assembly, I believe it is critical for member states to consistently implement resolutions in support of disaster risk reduction. I will continue to do my utmost to facilitate further discussion and action on this issue. There are severe limits to our capacity to prevent natural disasters from striking, but the same cannot be said of our ability to mitigate the consequent high death tolls and expensive destruction. These are far from inevitable. They can, and in my view, must be prevented. I strongly support UNSGAB's 6 imperatives, which is a common-sense approach that focuses on enhancing preparedness before adversity strikes. Such an approach was recently endorsed at a meeting which took place in the Liberian capital of Monrovia in January. Governments from across the African continent, together with development partners such as the UN, identify holistic water resource management as a key instrument for mitigating the impact of climate change. It is clear that issues like water cannot be addressed by the efforts of individual nations. The growing stress on water resources can only be ameliorated if every member state commits to participating in a common effort, whilst recognizing at the same time that water infrastructure modernization is a core national interest for each and every one. And that is why I believe we should address the relationship between water and disasters within the nascent framework of the post-2015 development agenda. The General Assembly was given the responsibility by world leaders last June in Rio to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, a central pillar of the post-2015 agenda. In fact, I believe this is a strategic issue of the first order, one that will frame much of the UN's work for decades to come. The recent formation of the Open Working Group, which is responsible for defining the SDGs and presenting them to the plenary of the 68th session of the General Assembly, is a very welcome development. We are going to have our first meeting on March 14, and I will give deliberations of the group my full attention. By the end of the session, I hope the group may well be on its way to fulfilling the task of formulating the Sustainable Development Goals, which in my view should address, amongst others, the challenges we have come together to discuss today. I believe, Excellencies, that we must act with all deliberate speed to secure a safe, sustainable world. As the Secretary General himself remarked in his speech after being elected to his second term, we have to link the dots amongst climate change, food crisis, nutrition, water scarcity, energy shortages, and gender empowerment. This is what he calls the golden thread. It is my firm belief that the General Assembly, as the chief deliberative, policy-making and representative organ of the United Nations, should play a more visible role and more active role in weaving this golden thread more seamlessly together in the period before us. Thank you for your attention.